I mean, let's be adults about it, Dana said, swirling her wine like she was discussing redecorating the living room. You keep the Honda, I'll take the house. It just makes sense. I've already got the kids' routines down. You can visit on weekends, holidays maybe. I'll be flexible. She said flexible like it was a favor, like she was doing me a kindness after gutting me alive. Across the table, the lasagna sat untouched. She'd made it from scratch, probably so she could say later, "See, I even cooked for him the night I ended things." I tried to be nice. I stared at the bubbles rising in my water glass. My fork clinked against the plate when I set it down. She didn't flinch, just kept talking like this was some HR meeting where she was letting me go with a severance and a handshake. "You're not the type to fight, Martin," she said, almost gently, like a nurse informing you they'd be amputating below the knee. "You're a calm guy. Everyone knows that about you." I nodded. One nod. Small. Just enough. Then I stood up, took my plate, and walked it to the sink. No rage, no tears, just a rinse under the faucet, and the sound of the dishwasher door clicking shut. She didn't follow me, didn't offer a hug, just sipped her wine and probably imagined how she'd spin this into a tragic but necessary split for the neighbors. Martin just couldn't handle the pressure. He was never really present. That night, after she went to bed, early, like always these days, I went into the garage to dig out the boxes I hadn't touched since the layoff. Old tools, blueprints from my construction days, and a phone I used back when I freelanced. It lit up when I plugged it in. 10% battery and one saved voice recording, no label. Just a timestamp from 8 months ago. I hit play. Laughter, her laughter, muffled by a jacket pocket or something, but unmistakably Dana. "He won't even show up to court," she said, somewhere in the background. "I've got this in the bag. He's too soft. All I have to do is cry and mention the kids." Another laugh, sharper, meaner. "I mean, God, the guy gets nervous ordering food. A courtroom would crush him." I didn't move for a full minute, just stared at the blinking red light on the recorder like it was pulsing in sync with something dying in my chest. Then I copied the file. 2 copies, actually. One to a USB drive, the other to a hidden folder in my cloud account. Then I labeled it "Not Soft." By the way, if you've made it this far and you're feeling something crawl up your spine reading this, maybe take a second to hit follow. Over 90% of the people never do. But it pushes us to keep going, to keep exposing things people want buried. Anyway, in the morning, I made pancakes for the kids. Dana breezed into the kitchen in leggings and her good vibes only hoodie, humming some Taylor Swift song under her breath. She kissed my shoulder on autopilot and poured herself coffee. I smiled at the kids, wiped syrup off my daughter's chin, and looked at the woman who used to be my wife, but who now looked at me like I was a stepping stone she'd finally outgrown. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. Not anymore. I was collecting, watching, planning. Every sentence she spoke was a blueprint. Every lie, every smug glance, another crack in the foundation she thought was so solid. And me? I was the guy she built it on, the guy who wouldn't fight, the guy who wasn't the type. She was right about one thing. I had been soft, but soft things don't break, they absorb. And when they hit back, it's not with noise, it's with weight. The next morning, I started keeping a log, not a diary. Those are for feelings. This was a blueprint, date, time, what she said, what actually happened, and which lie she'd chosen to sprinkle over reality that day like powdered sugar on poison. February 4th, Dana told Mrs. Clegg from next door that I missed Lily's dentist appointment. Reality, I was the one who scheduled it, drove her there, and sat through 45 minutes of Frozen 2 on repeat while she got sealants. February 7th, told her mom on speakerphone I was barely working and too depressed to function. Reality, 2 freelance projects delivered, 20,800 transferred to our joint account. Every log was a beam, every timestamp a screw. The more I wrote, the more solid it became. My case, my resolve, my slow evolution from background extra in my own life to someone constructing something she wouldn't see coming until it collapsed on her perfect little brunch life. By the end of the week, I had a 3-ring binder, red, unassuming. But inside, it had teeth, but even teeth need a bite. So I called someone I hadn't spoken to in 6 years. Pete, it's Martin. Yeah, that Martin. Silence. Listen, I know you're probably slammed. What's wrong? He asked. I exhaled, just once. Divorce. Custody. She's trying to make me look unstable. He didn't ask which she. Dana was unforgettable. Pete and I used to pour concrete together before he went back to school. Last I heard, he was practicing law out in the suburbs, mostly custody stuff, messy split-level nightmares and soccer practice tug-of-wars. Not exactly the kind of attorney I could afford, but not the kind I could skip either. We met in his office 2 days later. It smelled like cheap coffee and old books and dust, which felt oddly comforting, like an old site trailer. He listened as I laid it all out. The logs, the fake smiles, the voice recording, how she'd started laying groundwork for a character assassination while pretending to be the cooperative co-parent. She's already reshaping the narrative, I said. I'm the unmotivated dad. Emotionally checked out, she's practically daring me to challenge her. Pete leaned back, pinched the bridge of his nose, then looked at me the way foremen look at new guys who haven't been crushed by a pallet yet. You sure you're ready for this? Real custody fights. They get bloody, especially when the mom's been building a pity persona. I nodded. He flipped through my binder, page after page. Then he stopped. She said you threatened her? She will say it, hasn't yet, but I can feel it coming. You're going to need more than logs and screenshots, he said, tapping the table. You need to punch her story in the throat. Someone who'll shake her. Someone she doesn't know we have. I opened the drawer in my home office that night. It creaked, because of course it did, and inside was a manila folder labeled Daniel, a name I wasn't supposed to remember, a ghost she tried to erase. She once told me about him in passing, her first husband, a disaster she escaped, claimed he went off the grid. I think he joined a cult or something, she laughed, slicing cucumbers, but I remembered the way her voice caught, just for a second, like a loose wire sparking under drywall. I'd Googled him once, nothing, but I didn't stop there. Turns out, people forget to scrub everything. Local wedding announcements from 13 years ago, county clerk archives, a Facebook comment from someone's aunt. So sorry things didn't work out with Dana. You deserve better, Danny. I never forgot. Back then, I didn't ask more. Didn't want to seem jealous, didn't want to poke the sleeping bear. But now I had a reason to knock on that door. Yeah, because if Daniel was still out there, and if he had his own version of events, then Dana's house of cards wasn't just wobbly, it was begging for wind. She told Mr. and Mrs. Langford, the sweet retired couple next door, that I snapped last Thanksgiving. He threw a remote across the room, scared little Eli half to death. I've been walking on eggshells ever since. That never happened. We did argue about how she spent 4 hours FaceTiming with her coworker upstairs during dinner prep while I wrangled a toddler and tried not to burn the turkey, but no remote was thrown. I raised my voice, sure. But you know what scared Eli? When Dana told him I was having one of my spells and dragged him upstairs, whispering loudly enough for me to hear. Sometimes Daddy gets like this. She didn't need proof. She just needed volume. By the time I walked outside the next day, 3 neighbors looked at me like I was a raccoon in their recycling bin. Pity mixed with suspicion. Not one of them had the balls to ask what really happened. Dana had mastered a new tactic. Keep lying loudly, often, and early. Then, when the truth shows up late and polite, it looks like the lie's weird cousin. So I started stacking truth. Hospital records. Clean. No psych admissions. No prescriptions. Parenting logs. Every pickup. Every drop-off. Every note from every teacher. Therapy receipts. Weekly sessions for the last 14 months. Half of them solo, half with Eli. Dana came to 3. I handed all of it to Pete, who whistled low and said, You know, you're building a hell of a spine for someone supposedly too unstable to hold a remote. I smiled, just a flicker. She's expecting a jellyfish. But paper wasn't going to be enough. Not for what was coming. I needed something older, heavier. The map app took me 2.5 hours west, 1 gas stop, 2 cups of terrible coffee, and 1 moment where I almost turned around. The road got narrower, and the houses started sagging like old drunks. Finally, I pulled up to a weather-stained ranch house with a chain-link fence and a tilted mailbox that read, Rowan. Daniel. I killed the engine and sat there. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter than I meant them to. What the hell was I even doing? Then the porch door creaked open. He didn't look like the ghost I expected. Graying hair, sure, a little hunched. But his eyes? Sharp, alert, the kind of eyes that had watched too many people lie and gotten real quiet about it. He looked at me for a long time before saying a word. Finally, I stepped out of the car and walked to the gate. Didn't touch it, just stood there and said, She told me you were dead. He raised one eyebrow. I added, not directly. She said you disappeared, no contact, vanished. Then once, half drunk, she muttered something about closing a chapter for good. He nodded, slowly. Figures. I need to talk to you. He didn't ask my name, just stepped back and said, I've been waiting for someone to find me. Inside, his house smelled like pipe tobacco and rusted radiator. There was a wall of books, all cracked spines and no dust, and a file box marked legal 2012-2013. He poured 2 whiskeys, no questions. We sat across from each other, 2 men linked by a woman who had rewritten both of us into background scenery. I tried to tell people, he said finally, back when it all went down, but she got to them first, said I hit her, said I ran off to avoid jail time. She said you tried to destroy her credit, that you harassed her. She filed a police report, he said, pulling a faded folder from the box, then pulled it, said she didn't want to ruin my life. What she really wanted was leverage, something to use if I ever popped back up. Inside the folder were scans, copies of text messages, statements, a restraining order filed by him, not her, photos of bruises, his bruises, wrists, cheek, ribs. She broke a lamp over me once, he said, sipping. Said she'd call the cops and say I attacked her with the shards unless I packed up and left. Why didn't you fight it? Didn't have a kid with her, didn't have a reason to stay. I figured disappearing was safer. We sat in silence for a long moment. I have a reason, I said. Daniel looked at me. For the first time, there was something like hope in his eyes. It looked rusty, like it didn't quite fit his face anymore. She's building a case that I'm unstable, unfit, unworthy of custody. He nodded. That's her move. I don't need revenge. I need the truth. He smiled. Not a happy smile. More like a tired man remembering how it feels to stand up after a long time on the floor. I'll testify, he said, but you need to know something. What? She won't just burn bridges. She'll set the whole damn town on fire to stay warm. I looked him dead in the eye. Then I guess it's time someone handed her a match she can't hold. The first thing Pete said after reading Daniel's file was, Holy shit. He didn't look up from the folder for a full minute. Just turned pages slowly, each one louder than the last, the kind of quiet that makes your stomach tighten. When he finally did speak, his voice had dropped an octave. This isn't just about custody anymore, he said, tapping the edge of a notarized statement. This is about character. We're not just disproving her. We're demolishing the story she's built around you. I sat across from him in his office. Saturday morning, blinds half drawn, half the city still nursing hangovers. And all I could think about was how I used to believe in that story myself. For a while, I believed I was passive, the easygoing one, the dad who didn't push back. Then I saw the way she rewrote Daniel, then me, and I realized Dana didn't rewrite men. She erased them. She didn't divorce people. She replaced them with cautionary tales. Pete slapped a yellow legal pad on the desk. We need to build a timeline. Every interaction, every lie she's told publicly, every inconsistency. We don't go in swinging. This isn't a bar fight. This is architecture, precision demolition. So we built it. Week by week, evening by evening, I filled that pad with ink. 2015, Dana told her co-workers I was laid off due to stress. Truth was, I took a buyout package when the company relocated on her advice. 2017, she told her mom I was in therapy for anger issues. Nope. Grief counseling after my brother's overdose. She even accompanied me once, smiled at the therapist and called it healing together. All of it documented. And Daniel? Daniel was a gold mine of rot. Turns out their marriage ended in 20. I'd only known he vanished. The truth was he fled town after she filed a false assault accusation, one she never pushed through to court. Why? Because she got what she wanted. The apartment, the savings account, and a signed agreement that he'd never contact her again. He handed over the full packet. Screenshots from their texts where she threatened to destroy him legally if he didn't cooperate. An email she sent to his employer's HR department, an anonymous tip about violence at home. He was fired a week later. She made him disappear. And then she made him forget himself. She told her parents you were mentally unstable, I told him one evening, reviewing the statements. He laughed. She told mine I joined a cult. Pete arranged for a notary to witness Daniel's sworn affidavit. We scheduled a private investigator to confirm the timeline of his move, the apartment lease under a new name, the unofficial restraining order he lived under without a single court asking him to. I just wanted to stay off her radar, Daniel admitted. Turns out, off her radar means off the map. Now he was back on it. Pete leaned back in his chair after the second strategy session, arms folded behind his head, and said, "You know what scares narcissists the most? Reality. History. Especially the parts they buried and assumed would stay dead." I didn't smile. I couldn't, not yet. But something in me stopped flinching. There was a purpose now, not just for the fight, but for every moment she'd made me feel small. For every dinner party where she'd told subtle jokes at my expense, for every eye roll when I got excited about a new project, for every bedtime story she missed because she was taking a bath to decompress from a fight she started. We prepped witnesses, old friends who'd stopped calling me, not because they hated me, but because Donna had preemptively rewritten the breakup story with, "He just wasn't stable anymore." My sister, who Dana once whispered to in confidence that she worried about how I'd handle being a part-time dad. And then the character witnesses, teachers, the kid's pediatrician, my therapist. "Do you want to be the guy who gets custody?" Pete asked during a break, "or the guy who burns down a lie that's lasted 10 years? "Both," I said, no hesitation. Because once you watch someone rewrite your life in real time, watch them turn your kindness into weakness, your silence into guilt, your love into ammunition, something in you cracks. And through that crack, something new grows. Not rage, not vengeance, just focus. Daniel's final addition to the file wasn't a statement, it was a photograph. Dana, younger, standing in front of a police station, smirking, holding a file folder. The one she claimed contained evidence of Daniel's abuse. The back of the photo had her handwriting. "Always keep a backup." I stared at that line for a long time. Then I said to Pete, "So will I." The heels hit the tile before she even entered the courtroom. Click, 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 each one more smug than the last, like punctuation marks to a monologue only she was delivering. Dana walked in like she was accepting an award, wearing a pale blue wrap dress that said "I'm peaceful" and heels sharp enough to cut concrete. Arm looped through her attorneys like they were a newly engaged couple waltzing into an overpriced tasting menu. Behind them trailed her parents, both of whom gave me the kind of stiff-lipped nod reserved for waiters who forget the extra lemon. I didn't stand. I didn't flinch. I just sat there. Second row, center aisle. My tie was slightly crooked on purpose. Behind me, Daniel adjusted his cufflink. He looked like a corporate ghost, gray suit, quiet eyes, face no one would immediately clock unless they really paid attention. And Dana, she never paid attention unless it was about her. Her eyes scanned the room like a drone on a recon mission, saw me, paused. She smirked, tilted her head slightly, that half-condescending angle she used when explaining math homework to our son like he was concussed. Then she blew a kiss. A slow, sarcastic puff of air that landed somewhere near my chest. Her attorney chuckled, probably thinking this was all going to be over by lunch. She leaned in and whispered to him, loud enough to be overheard, quiet enough to pretend it was private. "He doesn't have the guts." I didn't blink, just turned slightly in my chair and offered her a nod, not a submissive one, not scared, more like, "You're going to remember this nod in about 30 minutes, and it's going to haunt you." She sat down, crossed her legs, and began scrolling through her phone like the court was keeping her waiting. Her attorney opened his briefcase, pulled out a yellow legal pad already half filled. Dana leaned in and started pointing at bullet points. Daniel, still anonymous, flipped open a worn leather folder on his lap. Inside, printed copies of every statement, every notarized affidavit, every photograph and date-stamped email she never knew existed. "Let her settle in," Pete said quietly beside me. "I want her to get comfortable." The judge walked in. Dana immediately straightened her posture, softening her face into concerned mother mode, hand gently on her chest. Eyes just a little glossy, not enough to cry, just enough to say, I'm holding it together for the kids. I watched her attorney hand the clerk a folder, thin, probably light on substance, heavy on assumptions. Pete handed in ours, closer to a brick than a binder. The judge glanced over the paperwork, adjusted his glasses, and asked if either side wanted to speak before opening statements. Dana's attorney stood. Your Honor, we are here today to seek a custody arrangement that reflects the emotional and environmental needs of the children. The mother has provided consistent care, stability, and nurturing. Pete didn't object, just let him keep digging. Dana nodded along with each word like she was hearing a sermon written just for her. And when the attorney mentioned me, the father, while well-meaning, has exhibited patterns of passivity and emotional disengagement, Dana turned and glanced at me, lips twitching like she was biting down a laugh. I looked past her, to the man behind me, still unseen, still loading the chamber. When Pete stood, he didn't bother with theatrics. Your Honor, he said, we agree that today is about the well-being of the children, and we believe their well-being depends on more than who has the better smile or who controls the story. Dana's lips parted slightly, a crack in the armor. Pete continued, we're prepared to present documentation, eyewitness testimony, and a sworn statement from an individual whose experience with the respondent directly contradicts her character presentation to this court. The judge blinked. Is this person present? Pete turned to me. I nodded once, and Daniel stood. Dana turned reflexively, because that's what you do when movement breaks your rhythm. Her face didn't change all at once. It shifted in segments. Eyebrows first, then lips, then the subtle but irreversible widening of the eyes. She whispered something to her attorney. He looked confused. The judge leaned forward. Is that actually him? Daniel adjusted his tie. Yes, Your Honor. And with that, the room didn't explode. It imploded, silently, like pressure changing in an airplane cabin. Dana's parents stiffened. Her attorney looked between Daniel and his notes, realizing that no version of those pages could possibly account for this variable. And Dana? She didn't move. She just stared, as if the past had materialized in human form and casually walked into her perfectly curated courtroom narrative. She opened her mouth, closed it, and for the first time since the morning she told me, "You're not the type to fight." I saw something behind her eyes. It wasn't fear, not quite. It was something worse. Recognition. Dana's lawyer rose like a man with a winning lottery ticket in his pocket, confident, measured, script memorized to perfection. He adjusted his cuff, addressed the judge with the kind of courtroom polish you only get from overcharging insecure clients, and started spinning his story like a spider with tenure. Your Honor, this case is not complicated. My client seeks a reasonable custody arrangement. She is the primary caregiver. The home is stable. The routines are in place, and the children are thriving under her care. Dana sat demurely, one hand on her lap, the other resting gently over her necklace like a widow at a funeral, the mother of reinvention. So poised, she almost looked bored. Mr. Martin, while clearly devoted to his children, has a well-documented pattern of emotional withdrawal. There are concerns, documented and expressed in our statements, regarding his psychological stability. An incident involving property damage and emotional volatility was corroborated by our client, and neighbors have voiced their apprehensions about his ability to create a safe and nurturing environment. He turned slightly toward me, not enough to be aggressive, just enough to look concerned, like he was worried I might fold right there from the weight of my own inadequacy. Dana sniffed quietly. I watched her eyes dart to the judge, subtle, practiced, like she was making sure he saw how composed she was despite all this hardship. Pete stood, adjusted his tie, and walked forward like he was bored of letting liars speak. With respect, Your Honor, I'd like to enter several documents into evidence. He laid out a file. This includes a complete parenting log maintained by my client over the past year, pickups, drop-offs, appointments, meals, bedtime routines, including photographs and receipts. You'll also find certified hospital documentation that clearly contradicts any claims of psychological instability, no admissions, no medications, no diagnosis of any kind. He placed a second folder on the table. These are statements from neighbors, those same neighbors, confirming Mr. Martin's presence, composure, and direct involvement in his children's lives, including 2 who have written that they were surprised by Ms. Martin's characterization of him as volatile. Dana's jaw clenched just for a second. A crack in the ice. Pete kept going. You'll also find documentation of therapy sessions attended, solo and with his children, along with receipts, notes, and a letter from the children's therapist confirming consistent engagement, progress, and emotional availability from the father. The judge scanned the files briefly, nodding once. Dana crossed her legs in the opposite direction, clearly recalibrating the body language she'd rehearsed in the mirror. Then Pete smiled, just slightly. And lastly, Your Honor, we'd like to call a witness. The judge looked up. A witness? Pete turned to me. I nodded. Yes, I said, we'd like to call Daniel Rowan to the stand. Dana's lawyer blinked like a computer freezing mid-download. I'm sorry, who? Daniel stood, 3 rows behind me, quietly. No theatrics, no drama. Just a man with documents in a slim folder and a face that had disappeared a decade ago. Donna turned, not in curiosity, not in confusion, but in reflex, a deep cellular reflex. Like a deer hearing a twig snap after months of silence. Her face stopped mid-expression, lips parted but no sound, hands frozen in mid-fidget, the color drained, not immediately but subtly, like someone dimming the lights in her soul, one switch at a time. Her lawyer leaned toward her, whispered. She didn't respond. The judge blinked, removed his glasses. Is that actually him? Daniel's voice was calm, firm. Yes, Your Honor. He walked forward, that slow, even pace of someone who knows they've already won something, just not sure which prize it'll be. I have a sworn statement notarized. It includes my former relationship with Ms. Dana Martin, formerly Dana Rowan, and the events leading up to our divorce, including a false accusation filed and later retracted, which I believe is relevant to the court's assessment of character in this custody dispute. Dana finally found her voice. Your Honor, this is outrageous. He's not relevant. He's not. The judge raised a hand, not dismissive, commanding. Sit down, Ms. Martin. Her mouth stayed open for a beat too long. She glanced at her attorney, but his expression had shifted. Less chess master, more guy caught bluffing at poker. Daniel took the stand. Pete handed the judge a copy of Daniel's affidavit. Multiple pages signed and sealed, texts, emails, photographs. The works. Dana's parents looked at each other with the kind of expression you only wear when your daughter's fairy tale has suddenly sprouted fangs. The judge flipped through the first 3 pages, paused. Let the witness speak, he said. Dana reached for her water but knocked it over. Panic isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the sound of a plastic cup rolling across the courtroom floor. She scrambled to pick it up, her hands shaking slightly. And me? I sat there, still, watching. Because this wasn't revenge. This was the beginning of record. Daniel adjusted the mic like he'd done it before. Like testifying was a habit he'd picked up in another life, or maybe one he'd been preparing for since the day Dana convinced the world he didn't exist. Full name for the record? The bailiff asked. Daniel Rowan. His voice didn't tremble. It didn't even dip. He looked straight ahead, not at Dana, not at me, like he was telling the story to time itself. I was married to Dana in 2010, briefly. She was charismatic, assertive, made fast friends, moved fast with everything actually, including controlling the narrative. Dana shifted in her seat. Her lawyer tried to whisper something, but she brushed him off. Daniel continued. In 2012, we separated. She said I was smothering her, accused me of emotional abuse. Then when I moved out, she escalated it to physical, filed a report with the local police claiming I assaulted her, that I'd punched a hole in the wall, thrown her keys at her, and grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. He held up a photo. The judge leaned forward. Your Honor, this photo was submitted as evidence of that bruise, but if you look closely, he handed it to the clerk, who passed it up. It's from a medical website, a stock photo. The metadata on the file proves it wasn't even taken with her phone. She sent it to her attorney anyway. The judge squinted, his lips pressed tight. Dana sat upright, fingers digging into her chair. Her jaw clenched so hard I could hear the cartilage from 3 rows away. Daniel didn't waver. I didn't contest the charges. I was working for an engineering firm. Any hint of domestic abuse, even unproven, would have blackballed me. So I took a deal, a private settlement, left town, Moved to another state, changed my name. We signed a mutual no-contact agreement, and he opened a file. Included in that agreement were her terms. She kept the apartment, the car, and the joint account. I signed over everything. It wasn't worth the risk. The judge looked up. Did she threaten you? Daniel nodded, calm. Multiple times. I have texts, emails, I can submit those. Each one warned me to stay gone, that if I resurface, she'd make it worse next time. Her words. Dana shot up. That's a lie. The courtroom froze. The judge didn't look up. Sit down, Ms. Martin. But he's twisting everything. Sit down. Dana's lawyer stood halfway like he might try to step in, then thought better of it. He sank back into his chair, blinking like he was suddenly realizing the boat he'd boarded was made of cardboard. Daniel waited until the silence was whole again, then continued. Everything I'm saying is under oath. I have nothing to gain. I was fine staying silent. But then Mr. Martin showed up, said she was trying the same playbook, that she was about to take his kids away too. He looked at the judge directly now. She ruins people quietly. With charm, she's believable because she's practiced. Dana's parents were ghost white. Her mother's lips were moving, but no sound came out. Her father just sat still, the tips of his fingers pressed together like he was holding in a scream. I didn't speak, not once, because when your opponent starts digging their own grave, you don't interrupt. You hand them a better shovel. The judge asked 2 more questions. Daniel answered both succinctly. He submitted the documents. And then the judge closed the file with a heavy, deliberate snap. Thank you, Mr. Rowan. You may step down. As Daniel walked past, he didn't look at Dana. That was my job. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her hands were shaking. Her breathing had gone shallow. She whispered something to her lawyer again, but this time he just looked straight ahead, no longer sure where his paycheck would come from next. Your Honor, Pete said calmly, we rest our case for now. Dana stood again, this time without permission. I need to respond. The judge glanced at her like a man debating whether to put down a dog that just bit him. You'll get your turn, Ms. Martin, but know this. He leaned forward, removed his glasses. This isn't looking like a custody dispute anymore. It's starting to look like a pattern. Dana opened her mouth, closed it. This time, there was no plastic cup to knock over, nothing left to spill, just her, alone in the storm she summoned, no wind, just gravity. The second the judge called for a recess, Dana was already halfway to the door, heels cracking like gunfire against the courthouse floor. Her voice followed, slicing through the hallway before the door even swung shut. You said this wouldn't happen, she shouted at her attorney. You told me they had nothing. He tried to calm her, flat palms out, speaking in that low, professional hum lawyers use when they're too embarrassed to be seen losing control of their client. But Dana wasn't hearing it, not today, not after Daniel. You knew he was alive. You were supposed to prep for this. I didn't even know who he was, the attorney hissed, because you told me he didn't exist. You're damn right I told you that, she snapped, because he wasn't supposed to exist anymore. The hallway fell silent as a janitor backed his cart slowly out of the blast radius. I stepped outside the courtroom into the opposite hallway. Quiet, sunlit, the kind of moment that should have felt peaceful but just tasted like static. I loosened my tie, exhaled. A court officer leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, watching the double doors like he'd seen this scene more times than he could count. He nodded at me. Good move, he said, voice low and even. We've seen her kind before. I raised an eyebrow. Type that thinks charm's a shield, he added, only works until the bullets come from behind. I didn't say anything, just nodded back and watched the sunlight crawl up the wall like a timer on the whole thing, winding down. Inside, Pete was still gathering documents, calmly placing everything back in our folder, probably already planning the next phase. But Dana? Dana was trying to staple her story back together with fury and volume. I want the record corrected, she barked as she shoved open the courtroom doors again. This is character assassination. He's a bitter ex, and they're both conspiring. The judge, still seated and unmoved, tapped the mic once. Just once. Ms. Martin, step forward. She blinked, frozen mid-sentence. I have requested an emergency character evaluation, he said, cool and clinical. For both parties. Effective immediately. Her lawyer looked like he'd aged 10 years in 5 minutes. And, the judge added, we are opening a formal review of all previous statements given under oath by the respondent. Dana flinched, particularly those which conflict with the new documentation presented today. Her eyes darted around the courtroom like she could find an exit no one else saw. Your Honor, I didn't lie, she started, voice soft now, like that would help. The judge didn't raise his tone. He didn't need to. You gave sworn testimony, Miss Martin, stating your former husband was unreachable, uncontactable, presumed missing. You claimed there was no history of domestic conflict predating this marriage. He paused. Let it sting. Today, your former husband presented notarized evidence to the contrary. Dana opened her mouth to spin something, anything, but Pete stood. For the record, he said, we did not contact Mr. Roan until after we had independently verified the history. My client had no prior relationship with him. The judge looked at Dana. Do you wish to clarify anything under oath now before we move forward? She hesitated. That fatal pause, that glitch in the programming, the moment where all her instincts screamed at her to charm her way out. But charm, here, had officially expired. I didn't remember it like that, she tried. Understood, the judge said. Then we'll proceed with the evaluations. Bang of the gavel. Recess over. She didn't walk back to her seat. She floated, eyes glassy, lips twitching like she was biting the inside of her mouth just to stay grounded. And me? I didn't look at her. Not once. Because there's something more lethal than anger. Silence. Silence when the mask cracks. Silence when the narrative collapses. Silence when you realize the courtroom isn't where you perform anymore. It's where you get measured, and she was shrinking fast. When the hearing resumed, the room felt colder, not physically, but something in the air had shifted. The lights were the same, the judge was the same, but the weight of what had just unfolded pressed down on everyone's shoulders like a silent avalanche. Dana's chair was still warm when she sat down, but she looked smaller in it now, like the fabric was swallowing her whole. Her lawyer had stopped taking notes. Now he just held his pen like a cigarette he wasn't allowed to light. The judge cleared his throat. No theatrics, no long preamble. In light of new testimony, verified documentation, and emerging inconsistencies in the respondents' sworn statements, he began, this court is making the following interim adjustments pending full review. Dana shifted. Just once. Subtle. Like someone bracing for a tap and getting a punch. Primary custody of the minor children is temporarily suspended from the respondent. Full custody is transferred to the petitioner until psychological evaluations for both parties are complete and character assessments finalized. Gasps echoed like a dropped glass in a cathedral. Dana's mother actually choked on hers. Her father stiffened, rigid, like a man forced to watch a building collapse in slow motion. Dana, however, didn't gasp. She screamed, "This isn't fair." The outburst hit the walls like a firecracker. He set me up. They're working together. I swear to God, Daniel's lying. This is his revenge. The judge didn't flinch. Ms. Martin, you are out of order. He planned this. He always wanted to make me look crazy. Don't you see? I gave up everything for those kids. I built their lives. The bailiff took a step forward. Pete remained seated, calm, flipping through the documents like he was double-checking a grocery list. I stood. Your Honor, I said, voice level. Thank you. That was it. No gloating, no grin, just acknowledgement. Dana whipped her head toward me so fast I thought I heard her neck pop. You think you've won? She shouted, lunging forward just enough to make the bailiff raise a hand. You think this is over? I'll ruin you. You hear me? I turned to face her fully for the first time all day and said, steady as stone, you already did. I just stopped letting you. The words hit her harder than any ruling. You could see it in her shoulders, how they didn't just drop, they caved, because for the first time, the power didn't belong to her. The performance had ended, the audience had left, and the script she'd written was now shredded across the courtroom floor. The judge banged the gavel once. Ms. Martin, you are to leave the courtroom. Your attorney will coordinate with the court-appointed evaluator. Further outbursts will result in sanctions. She tried to speak again, but nothing came out. Just the open mouth of a woman choking on her own disappearing influence. Two officers gently guided her toward the exit. She didn't resist. But she didn't walk either. She drifted. Like someone slipping underwater after a fight they were certain they'd win. The doors closed behind her. Silence fell. Not the heavy kind from earlier, not the courtroom tension kind. This silence was lighter. Not peaceful. Not yet. But hollowed out, like a space had finally been cleared. Pete turned to me. That, he said, was the quietest win I've ever seen. But it didn't feel like a win. It felt like stepping out of a burning house. Everything blackened. Everything gone. But finally, no more fire. It was one of those warm November days that felt like a cosmic typo, sunny, cloudless, the breeze carrying more laughter than leaves. I sat on a bench just off the walking trail, coffee in hand, the kind that goes cold too fast but still tastes like something solid. In front of me, the park stretched out like a painting. Kids screamed in delight from the monkey bars. Dogs barked at pigeons. Joggers pretended not to hate jogging. And my kids, Eli and Lily, ran across the grass, faces painted in joy, feet pounding out some rhythm only they understood. No timers, no tension, just play. That alone would have been enough. But then Daniel showed up. He moved quietly, hands in his coat pockets, same sharp-eyed expression as the day I met him. Only this time, it was softer, less like a man being hunted, more like someone who had stepped out of the woods after years in the dark and remembered how to blink in the sun. He handed me a sealed envelope. Court cleared me too, he said. I'm free to go back to my name. I turned it over in my hand. You going to? He nodded. Yeah, I think I'm done hiding. I gave him a look, the kind that said what words couldn't wrap around. Thanks for showing up, I said. Daniel smirked. Thanks for dragging me out of the shadows. I forgot I was still in them. We sat for a second, watched the kids. They're loud, he said. They're supposed to be. Lily screamed something at Eli about being queen of the rock, and he immediately tried to climb the biggest boulder in the park without any plan past step 2. Think she'll come back around? Daniel asked. Dana. I didn't flinch at the name. Not anymore. Maybe, I said. She always floats, always finds a new version of herself to sell. But not here. Not with us. She'll spin it, he said. Of course. He stood, slid his hands back in his coat pockets. Let her spin. You've got gravity now. I watched him walk off down the trail, blending back into the weekend crowd like any other guy with somewhere to be and no one watching him too closely anymore. The envelope stayed in my hand, unopened. I didn't need to read it. That man had been declared real again. Not a rumor, not a lie, not a threat, just real. And me? I watched my son climb, watched my daughter taunt him with victory songs, watched both of them belong to something honest. They called out, Dad, come push us, like it was the only thing in the world that mattered, and maybe it was. I stood, not with swagger, not with some dramatic score playing in my head, just stood and walked toward them, not broken, not bitter, but whole. She had tried to rewrite me, replace me, reduce me, but you can't delete someone who remembers how to rebuild, not just himself, but everything worth holding.